you have questions? Am I loud enough? Yes, huh? Oh, that's good. No questions. Terry?
Francis, I'd like to explore the model you offered of understanding, which I found very interesting and very helpful, in which there was a question that was presented as a formulation, then there's an understanding, and then there's a formulation of that understanding. Let's take an example in which, let's say, I'm cooking something, and I decide to taste it. So I have the formulation, how does this taste? Then I have the experience of tasting and understanding, and then I express the understanding, this needs more cilantro. What's really going on there?
Well, it's a form of understanding, in fact. So you taste it, the question is it all right, right? And then you taste it, right? And when you taste it, it's a sense perception. And in order to know whether it's all right or not, you need first to have this sense perception through your taste buds, right? And then you have the answer, it's not all right. Let's say it's not all right. So between the two, there is the understanding that it's not all right. Now, it may be that this understanding that you have a preconceived notion of what all right means for you, right? So then you have the taste, you have the memory of the taste, you have the memory of the representation of what you want, okay? Your mind compares both, right? It's still a mind process, if you will. But then you have to find out, is it all right or not? So then the decision, it's all right or not, is made by consciousness, by you, not by the mind. You see? So it's an understanding. You have that. No, it doesn't. So it's a form of understanding. It is not the only type of gap between thoughts or between perceptions. Let me give you another example of such a gap, which is usually not interpreted as understanding. Let's say I am making tea, and I have put the tea leaves in the hot water, and they're supposed to stay there for 4 minutes, right? And then someone comes and asks me something, and so I try to find an answer to the question. I'm busy with something completely different. I've completely forgotten my tea. And all of a sudden the thought comes, gee, my tea, I forgot my tea, right? I have to remove the leaves from the water, right? So the point is that, let's say I was talking with someone about a problem with the electricity, just a random example. And so I was with my engineering mind, right, trying to find out. So I was thinking about electricity, you know. And this thought that I was entertaining and the thought, gee, I forgot my tea. The thought I forgot my tea is not the continuation of the thought about electricity. It's a totally different thought. So the thought about engineering had to come to an end for the thought about the tea to come, and we express that by saying, I just became aware that tea was waiting for me, right? I just became aware, meaning that the thought about electricity was there, came to a stop, there was a gap. In this gap, I became aware. In fact, I became awareness. I became conscious of something, and then I formulated, gee, I need to remove the leaves from the water. So the language says what it says. You know, I became conscious, suddenly I became aware, and there is this sudden aspect, you know, that there is this shift. You understand that it is very similar to understanding, right? Because of it is so sudden. There is no time that elapses. It's very similar. So a thought comes to an end, and that's typical of the interval between two thoughts. But you can have also the interval between two perceptions or bodily sensations. In the case of the culinary examples that you chose, the mind processes, just as it processes thoughts, the mind processes sense perceptions. We know that, right? The mind, for instance, what the retina sees is upside down, right? And the mind processes it. And also, we have two eyes, therefore we see two images. The mind processes them into one image with a depth, a dimension. But what we see is not what the image on the retina is, right? We see something else. So we see something that has been processed by the mind. But what has been processed by the mind is not a thought, but it's a bodily sensation. In the same way, your culinary thing, it's a thought-like perception processed by the mind because you have compared both, and that is presented to the awareness that says yes or no, and the awareness says no. Something is missing. It doesn't fit what I wanted. So again, there is a gap there of understanding at that moment. When the decision is made, no, it's not. So these are examples of gaps. Thoughts are not continuous, perceptions are not continuous. In fact, nothing is continuous. We know that, because everything is quantum, right? So in fact, everything is ultimately in nature is, how do you call that? Discrete. There are always discrete processes. Just like the images on the movie. So the continuity, the objective or the phenomenal continuity is an illusion. Just, by the way, just as quantum mechanics tells us that, generally speaking, physical processes are discrete at the microscopic level, in the same way, I'm not a field I'm expert on, but my understanding is that neuronal activity is very similar, because a neuron either it fires or it doesn't. Right? So since we have a limited number of neurons that fires, it means that all all brain processes are discrete. The continuity of brain processes is an illusion. So the continuity of thoughts, the continuity of perceptions is an illusion because the neurons fire or they don't. It's a yes or no situation, so it's binary actually. The nervous system is a binary system. Unless I'm missing something, doctor. I look at my experts here. I'm a biologist, I'm a pathologist.
But at some point in this process, awareness steps in and says, this isn't what I want.
Yeah, the decision, because as I said, you have an idea of what you want, you compare what you got to what you want, and then when you say it's not the same, it's a form of understanding. You understand? You realize, you suddenly become aware that, you suddenly become conscious, because before you make this decision, you have not made the decision, right? So at some point, there is a collapse that takes place.
Got it, thank you.
I think the reason why we have this binary logic, ultimately, right, that is so efficient, is for this very fact that the neuronal processes are binary. Either the neurons fires or not, so that the aggregate of all those neuronal processes is going to be binary in the same way.
It's either a 1 or a 0. It fires or it doesn't. Thank you.
I just have a question about why would consciousness... It's almost like consciousness has an opinion about your tea. Like, why would consciousness remind you or not?
I don't think that about the tea?
Yeah, your tea. It's either... It could just
why
go
not?
too long.
I am consciousness. I remind myself because I like the tea.
And when consciousness, gives us a little tickle during the day, oh, look at this, or whatever. It's the same.
It's all consciousness anyway.
But yeah.
So, but what I was pointing in the process, there is consciousness with object and consciousness without objects, and that's the important aspect that is overlooked, that is ignored in our culture. Consciousness without object, it's denied.
Yeah.
And the reality of consciousness is, as a result, conveniently denied for the following reason. That if you remove the experience of consciousness without object, all you have is subjective perceptions, mentations, right? Mm-hmm. And subtle perceptions, even. In other words, they are thought-like. And as a result, because a thought is nowhere to be found after it has been perceived, unlike a physical object, the thought are deemed to be less real than physical objects. You see?
Yeah.
And so that leads to a form of materialism which is prevalent in our universities, right? So that which real is this, is matter, and that is possible because of this fact that the reality of consciousness is conveniently ignored in spite of its blatant reality, right? Because that through which we know anything has to be at least as real as whatever is known. Otherwise, how could something which is an illusion know
real
the
thing.
real, right?
Yes, yes. Thank you.
So, the understanding that happens, so there's coming back to yesterday's, or day before yesterday's discussion, the story is told, and then there's a gap, and then the understanding happens. So,
Not then.
that,
There is a gap. The gap is the understanding.
it seems like understanding is a phenomena, is it not?
No, precisely. The formulation of it is a phenomenon. It depends on what you call a phenomenon. But what I call a phenomenon is something that appears in consciousness that has a shape and a name. It's a Namarupa thing. It's not just a Satchitananda thing, it's Satchitananda Namarupa, right? It has, so what is the color of understanding? What is the shape of in this moment when you understand?
There isn't, but
There isn't.
it is
The fact that there isn't, precisely, you are Satchitananda alone in this moment without Namarupa. Why? Because the previous Namarupa, which was the thought that you understood, is no longer present, and the next Namarupa, which is going to be the formulation of this understanding as a new thought, is not there yet. So in this moment you are alone. It's Turiya, the gap between two perceptions.
I thought understanding is an occurrence, because it's not always there.
Well, it's always there, but seen from the vantage point of the mind, which is conditioned by time, it's an occurrence. You see, occurrences, in fact, happen only from the vantage point of mind. From the vantage point of consciousness, nothing happens. Let me illustrate that by an example, by an analogy, that the fact that nothing happens, right? During your night dream, you dream that there is a huge guy, a cannibal, running with big teeth, running and very hungry, and that you are running for your life, right? Then, when you wake up, what has happened? Nothing has happened to you. Nothing. Right?
Right.
You cannot, right? You understand what I mean. You look at yourself, you are still there. You check your limbs and everything, nothing is missing. Even the most interesting parts for the nothing has happened. So in this analogy, the waking state stands for the vantage point of presence of consciousness. And the dream state represents the waking state. So in the waking state, it seems that things are happening. And it seems that there is time. In order for things to happen, you need time. But from the vantage point of presence, nothing ever happens. There is no time.
I get that, but I'm still not, maybe I'll have to, like you said, food for thought and think about it.
Yeah, food for thought.
Because it seems like, yes, the understanding needs the gap to occur. If I did not, let's say the story is completed and I didn't even bother to have a gap, like it just, I tried to...
Wait a minute. Make sure that you don't that there is no confusion in your mind between the understanding as an event, an actual event, and the formulation of this understanding, which can be memorized. Understand that understanding cannot be memorized. Do you remember?
That's true. No, that's true.
Because in order to memorize the way the mind works, that's very simple. Recollections of past events, that's what memory is. Memory is made of recollections, right? And recollections are thoughts. And thoughts are always phenomenal. In other words, a thought is always in terms of the senses, right? Therefore, since at the time of understanding, there is no phenomenal aspect, it cannot be remembered. Since only phenomena can be remembered. And phenomena can be remembered only because mind itself is made of phenomena. So a recollection is a new phenomenon that mimic a past phenomenon. That's all. But you cannot recollect understanding. In the same way that you cannot recollect love. In the same way that you cannot have a recollection of happiness. Why? Because love, happiness, understanding, beauty are not in time. They are timeless. They are noumenal aspects, if you will. They are aspects of reality, or they are in fact the experience of reality. So you cannot recollect it. For instance, you can let's say you find a tune beautiful, right? And you think that you can recollect the beauty of the tune, but no. What you do, you remember the tune, right? And then you play it inside, and it takes you to the same experience of beauty. But the experience of beauty is not, the tune is just a vehicle that takes you there.
Yeah, I get it now. Coming to a little bit superficial level now. The thoughts of I that come from this consciousness and trying to separate it out as that's not you, and that's not, I am just the consciousness out of which these thoughts are coming up. And right now, up till now, what was happening is habitually you are thinking that thought is about you, and then from that comes another thought about something else, like your aspects of life, and then the idea of coming back and reminding yourself constantly that these are just the thoughts. Is that automatically taken care of when you try to openly abide by the awareness? Or do we have to mentally deconstruct that?
There are many questions in that. When you are trying to mentally abide awareness, I don't know what you mean by that. So,
let's say
let me define for you what I mean by to abide as awareness, to make it simple. To abide as awareness means not to believe to be a separate consciousness, not to feel to be a separate consciousness. That's what it means. So don't make it complicated. In other words, to abide as awareness is the absence of a belief and of a feeling. That's it. So that's simple. So you cannot, as an act of will, eliminate a belief. You understand that? What is it that eliminates a belief?
I think you answered the question, which was that if you are awareness, then that automatically shines a light on what it is for.
What eliminates a belief is understanding of the falsity of this belief in the face of the facts of experience. That's
Right.
what. It's simple. That's what eliminates a belief. You cannot eliminate a belief the Gestapo way through violence. You see? Because then it comes back with a vengeance. The only way is intelligence, reason, to eliminate a stupid belief. It's intelligence that eliminates stupidity. More stupidity is not going to eliminate stupidity. So, and then, in addition to the belief of being a separate consciousness, there might be the feeling to be a separate consciousness. For instance, the feeling to be localized, right? So, the feeling to be this body. That's which we address in the yoga. Now, regarding now the beginning of your questions, the first part, I'm trying to clarify. I clarify the second part, when you were talking about what does it mean to abide as awareness. It's not an effort, it's a spontaneous result of understanding, okay, of intelligence. Now, that being said, once you have understood something, you own it. It doesn't mean that you immediately apply it, because you may have forgotten. But your understanding is always available to you, so you can go back to it, and as a result, apply it in the way you think, the way you believe, the way you feel, etc. That's very important, to apply it, not to say, okay, that's fine, yes, I understood. Let's do business as usual. No, it doesn't work that way. Now, the second thing is about when I think about me, about I. First of all, there is nothing wrong with using the pronoun I. I remember when actually it was before I met my teacher. I went to another teacher, to one of his retreat, and there was one of the disciples there, who had in turn, he was a kind of a small guru, and he had brought his disciple to this teacher. And it was very peculiar, because it was kind in the Krishnamurti coattails, if you will. And he had decided that the use of the pronoun I was not kosher. So he would use instead the we. So it was really funny, because at the dinner table, he sounded like royalty. Could we have the salt, please? You see, so sometimes the point is, I mean, it's okay to say, could I have the tea, please? You know, it sounds a little more normal. So the question is, what about I? You know, what about I? The problem is not, as Shakespeare would say, to think or not to think the pronoun I. That's not the question. The question is, when I say I, am I clear? Do I have a clarity about what I mean by I? That's all that is required. And questions are, do I mean my car or my house? Do I mean my body? Do I mean my mind? Or do I mean consciousness? All that is required, you can do that as an exercise. When you think I, instead of thinking, oh, I am again, I am in ignorance. No, you are not in ignorance. Just be clear about what you mean. If if it is your car, you are the manager of your car. If it is your body, you are the manager of your body. If it is your mind, you are the master of your mind. The mind is your servant. No problem. You are just the manager, the master. If it is consciousness, it's you. So when you say, I understand, that's consciousness. When you say, I love, I want, etc., all of that is consciousness. And usually consciousness is every time the I cannot be defined as an object. And if you say, I have a headache, that's the head that has a neck. You know, and if you say, I have to replace my fender, that's a car. It happens.
So this I is just nothing phenomenal that I can sense.
The real I, the I consciousness is non-phenomenal.
Right.
That to which everything appears, where does it appear? To
Nowhere.
what? To itself.
Yeah.
Right, to itself. So it is self-contained. It is a self-contained reality. It is autonomous.
So this understanding, as you are saying, needs to be applied in every aspect, right? Because to me it seems like I have to remind a lot that this is the understanding.
Yeah, you have the understanding, and then this understanding eventually will automatically apply itself. But there is a moment when you understand that since you are universal consciousness, you can facilitate the process as such within this body, mind. It's called the yoga of the energy, you know, in the Trika path of the Tantrikas. When you understand that as universal consciousness you can use your powers to eliminate the vasanas, then you have entered the path of the energy.
But that's not something you actively, of course, do, right? It's because
Yes, you do it actively as consciousness, obviously, yes. Everything you do with full knowledge that there is no separate doer, you do it as consciousness, obviously. Every activity, you even you don't need to have the full knowledge that it is not a separate doer. All you need is not to know whether consciousness is individual or universal. So every decision or activity that originates from this doubt, from this philosophical doubt, if you will, is in fact an activity of the Absolute. It's very important to understand, because often people they think, well, I cannot act in wisdom because I am in ignorance. So I have to wait up until I'm a sage to act like a sage. It's totally wrong. You see, we have to understand I'm already universal consciousness. It is only my belief to be separate that creates ignorant activity and ignorant thought. However, since I am a truth seeker, it means that I have a fundamental doubt regarding the nature of consciousness. And the doubt is about its limitness, its separateness. So the moment I stick to this doubt, in other words, I stick to the not knowing whether consciousness is universal or not, at that moment, I allow for consciousness to be whatever it is. You see? So everything that comes from this place of not knowing will be an action that comes from consciousness. Directly. In other words, it will be devoid of ignorance.
So two things. One is I as consciousness, the idea that this is also universal consciousness is also...
The idea that...
This is also a universal consciousness. It's not just a separate consciousness. So that is not a... To me, it seems like that is I don't know if intuition is the right word, but that is what it is. Like, it is. Yes, it's universal. But it's not something that's derived through...
Yeah, it's important to not to believe what I say, but to try to verify it in your life. That's why I don't want believers. I'm not the Pope.
Yeah, this is not a belief. This is a sense.
You see, what we know really about consciousness through the investigation, really, what we know is that we don't know. We don't know that it is separate. We know that we are it. And the beauty is that it is sufficient.
Right, so it's not separate because there is no evidence of it. That's how it is.
We don't know whether it's separate or not because there is no evidence that it is separate.
Yeah.
Other than what people say, but they say so much garbage that... and it doesn't work for them in terms of happiness. They are miserable. So there is something wrong in there. So eventually, as you keep trying to live your life in this not knowing, in other words, you will live your life allowing for consciousness to show its true colors, you will be convinced on the level of your mind that it is universal, right? But this conviction, the mind can never be 100% convinced, right? But it doesn't matter. Because if what the mind believes, that it is universal, is true, then it's not an impediment. You see, a positive belief which is backed by experience, even if this belief is not 100% certain, cannot be detrimental because it is in accordance with the truth. Whereas if the belief is not backed by facts, that can be detrimental. If you believe to have $1 million in your bank account and you sign some contract with someone paying with this fictitious $1 million, you may end up in jail. And you tell the judge, but your honor, I thought I had $1 million. The judge said, yes, but you paid for that for this beautiful Ferrari, and then you crashed the Ferrari.
Yep, thank you.
Hi, hi, Francis. Thank you for this week. So, over the course of the week, things have started to really unravel for me. Just in the fact that so many things that I thought about myself were real just don't hold up to the light of truth. And really are very insignificant to what I'm starting to discover here. And the more I welcome in my life the habits that I used to follow, the more there's like a resistance to truly welcoming it, because there's this fear that I might just disappear. or that and there's the fear also that I've never truly known who I am because
That's good.
the Eliotness seems so flimsy.
It's because you're so big, you can never, it's like one day I rented a chateau in the south of France where we had meetings like that and it was so big that I never knew how many rooms were there. So can you imagine if a chateau already you don't know how many rooms you have? Talking about our father's mansion, there are so many rooms that there is no way you can know. So you cannot know what you are. You're too big for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would also say that there's a tendency to try to get rid of sensations that arise in my body. So it's not true welcoming. It's like someone said, it's like welcoming with a bat behind my back.
I wonder who said that.
Yeah. So if you have any recommendations of what the
Don't
difference...
do it.
Don't do it. Is there a way to okay, don't do it?
Yeah, understand that, for instance, the yoga that we do is not about killing the sensations.
There's just a lot of fear that comes up.
Yeah.
Tons of fear.
Be interested. Be like you are. Your consciousness is looking at you like a scientist observing, like a zoologist observing an animal, right? Mm-hmm. And his behavior, how he eats, how he sleeps, how he mates, etc. It's weird. And so you look at yourself in this way, in a loving way, but with interest, curiosity, non-judgment, you see, and knowing that you are the witness of this animal.
Okay. Thank you.
Besides Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, do you have any other favorite movies that
I'm not that good. Yesterday I answered this question, so I have ready-made answers. One is As It Is in Heaven, a Swedish movie. Sweet. Another one is Dean Stanley, British movie. These are kind of for the people who are cultivated, who read the New York Times, right? Or the New York. And then for people who are a little less than All of Me with Steve Martin. And last time we saw My Blue Heaven with Steve Martin. So not highly philosophical, these two.
But with Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, it's the spiritual or the truth.
Very spiritual. Because humor is the most spiritual thing there is. I mean, you cannot, because humor is about freedom. Freedom is way above love. Love is overrated. Because the people who overrate love is because they are still in neediness. They overrate love because they want love. Freedom, it's
I thought you had us watch Dirty Rotten Scoundrels because of all the false identity, layers of false identity.
It's just, I mean, I love the creativity, I mean, in it, you know. And you have, what's the name? Professor Apfelstrudel or whatever. And he picks the thing and it's so fun. Women, we are more in trouble than women. We die younger. We have more prostate problems. What is beautiful in this movie is that every a funny situation is at the same time a setup for the next understanding, you see? So that there are no low moments. It's always on, you know. So it's a form of perfection, you know. It's just perfect.
All right, thank you.
Francis, so can you say a little about the I thought and the I feeling? What is its significance?
Okay. There is nothing wrong with the I thought, right? There's nothing wrong with the I thought. Mm-hmm. And as I said earlier, it depends what we mean. So what we need first is clarity. Right? And what we say, do I mean the body? Do I mean whatever? Or do I mean consciousness? Now, you see, as we say, the map is not the territory, right? The map is not the territory. So the I thought is the map. The I thought is not the real I. But in ignorance, we need to identify with an object. And ultimately, we identify with a story about me. And the story about me is like a sentence, right? I was born, I am not happy, I got my driver's license at that age, etc., right? A sentence. But what all these sentences have in common is the subject I, right? So if you look at these various sentences as you look at a tree, right, at a tree, so the trunk of the tree would be the I thought, and the sentences would be, you go along a branch, for instance, one big branch would be I am, right? So you take the branch I am. Another branch would be I want. Another branch would be I have, right? And then so I am, and then there is a sub-branch that says a man, another says a woman, another says stupid, another says, right? So there are many branches that branch out, but the common trunk of all of that is I. So in the identification, we usually take one path, starting from the trunk and, going up the branch to a limb, to a flower, to whatever, right? And then when we leave this one, we go back to the trunk, and then the next moment we go up. Now this tree also has roots, and the roots are like similar to the branches, right? So the tree of ignorance, if you will, the roots are feelings. The I feelings, if you will. And they vary in localizations, etc., in diversity, so they are like the roots. So the common ground is where the trunk meets the roots, there is this unique stem. And so we are like a little bug in ignorance that consciousness, instead of being the space in which this tree appears, is like a little bug that constantly navigates up and down, up to the branch, then another branch, down to a root, then to the trunk, then to another root, and to a branch, and constantly that, because ignorance can only exist in this agitation. As soon as this comes to an end, stops. There is no more ignorance. There is no room for it. There is then the necessity to realize our true nature. The tree is no longer, there is only the space, and we realize I am the space. So the little animal has to keep going up and down the roots and the branches at all times. And that's why what happens sometimes in the investigation is that the little animal slows down, and then there is this realization that if the little animal stops, I die. And it's true, the little animal disappears. Only the space remains. The tree doesn't exist, in fact, that I'm describing. Yeah. It exists only as the little animal walks. And it creates a branch along which or the roots along which it constantly walks. It doesn't have a real existence. So, food for thought, whatever.
So ignorance needs an object to hold on to.
Exactly, and it needs, that's the first quality. The second quality of it, or a specification of it, is that it is a dynamism. And therefore it requires effort. That's why, for instance, we apply the effortlessness yoga. With the effortlessness yoga, we slow down the little animal. And at some point, the little animal vanishes.
So is the objective to slow when the animal? Sorry, I think when the animal slows down, or even stops, the tree is no longer there. Basically.
Yeah. The realization that we are the space, if you will, when there is no longer any object present with which we can identify we are what we are, then the recognition of what we are is a necessity.
Thank you.
It doesn't mean that in a gap we have this liberating glimpse. The liberating glimpse doesn't apply to any form of understanding, because there are two kinds of understanding. There is phenomenal understanding, or let's put it this way, objective understanding, and there is noumenal understanding. It's understanding that relates to consciousness. Only understanding that of the latter kind is liberating. In other words, I can understand something about mathematics, but that doesn't liberate me. But to understand something about consciousness, yes. Or something about reality, yes. Something about what I am, yes. That's liberating.
Hi, Francis. I just have, I was just thinking about understanding in the gap, and I realized that I assumed that understanding meant that what was understood was correct. But now I'm seeing perhaps a difference between understanding and what is understood. Just understanding being the experience, like, is understanding an experience, not necessarily, or is it a constant? If it's that which, like, even if we're understanding that, if I understand that I don't understand something.
Understanding is a discovery of truth. Is that something that was not evident all of a sudden becomes evident. So it is the discovery of truth. Means discovery means it was covered, and the cover gets removed, so the truth is seen. The discovery of truth, right? That's understanding. The truth shines. The truth is the background of presence. That's why consciousness is also called truth. Sat in Sanskrit, Hak in Arabic, right? Truth, consciousness. The discovery of truth is similar to the discovery of consciousness. It's not similar, it's identical, it's the same thing. So that's what understanding means.
So understanding that it needs more cilantro.
Yeah, it's a truth about, it depends on what question was asked. If you ask a relative question, you'll get an answer in the relative realm, about the relative realm. But the answer will still come from the same place. You can understand, you are driving and you understand at some point, oh, I need to fill up the tank because I'm running out of gas. That's also a form of understanding. We know that in our daily lives.
I guess I just thought that we're always understanding something.
No. Yes, I see what you mean. The something is the formulation of the understanding. It's not the discovery. The discovery, in fact, is a non-event. If by event we mean something that happens. Because there is no space in which it happens, there is no time in which it happens. It's from the vantage point of the mind that then the mind makes an event out of it, formulates this event, gives it a name, and then you believe that the understanding is the name, again, the map that you have given, but the map is not the territory. The formulation of the understanding is not the understanding. However, the formulation of the understanding has a power to take you back to the understanding in the same way as a map is a useful tool to take you back to the place you are seeking on the territory. Right?
That's beautiful. Yeah, because if the understanding is, if the question is not relative and there's understanding, the formulation can be a very subtle image or...
Yeah. Actually, you'll see that in the beginning, people who come here, they may have to go against with a train of thoughts that they have heard here, and then they have their own train of thoughts, and then they say, oh yes, that makes sense. It takes them to the understanding. But then this train of thoughts becomes shorter and shorter, and then there is no real thinking. There is a direct knowledge of it.
Thank you.
I don't know if I got this right or wrong, but I think a couple of days ago you were talking about maybe when you were younger being a bit self-conscious, or maybe with women or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably
the younger the woman, the more beautiful the woman, the more self-conscious.
I understand. In other words, yeah. So
I was young.
So my question is, see, I'm feeling self-conscious now. Well, this week.
What?
This week when I've come here, it's the first time I've seen you, and I think for various reasons I felt self-conscious. No need to get into that, but from my understanding of what you talked about, the yoga meditations, you said that, I'm talking about self-conscious, feeling uncomfortable in social situations. That's one of my biggest issues, if not the biggest. I think you've said that it can't really be dealt with on the level of the mind.
Well, let me, I don't want any confusion with that. When I tell this personal story, is to illustrate. I don't tell it just in a gratuitous way for no good reason at all. I tell this seemingly personal story to illustrate something that I understood then, and which is prior to becoming interested in the truth. I was trying to get rid of this shyness through psychological manipulations, because I was not spiritually oriented. And something changed when I encountered first the books by Krishnamurti, but most importantly, when I met my teacher. Then, what I understood then was that ultimately, whatever psychological issue I had, be it shyness, be it fear, be it desire, be it whatever it was, it would be useless for me to try to resolve this issue by focusing on it and trying to manipulate my mind through psychotherapy or means of this sort, because the fundamental cause of this shyness, the shyness was simply a symptom. The shyness was not the illness.
Not the what?
Was not the illness. The shyness was just a symptom, and by trying to focus on the shyness, I would perhaps put a band-aid on the infection, but I wouldn't avoid the systemic infection. So the antibiotic was the understanding of ignorance, that ignorance was a cause of all psychological suffering, and that was the illness that had to be addressed. You see? So that was I am trying to illustrate. And I did absolutely nothing, I swear to you, from this moment I understood that, and that was right in the beginning. All my energy was turned towards liberation, towards the spiritual endeavor. I didn't look back into my shyness. But 4 years later, perhaps, 2 years, I would say, after I met my teacher, one day I realized, being in a social situation, that most of it had disappeared, that I was comfortable, you see, with people. And it had disappeared without me doing anything to that end. So, what is important is this, is that if someone comes here telling me I have a problem which is shyness, or which is addiction to something, to drugs or to whatever. And can you give me a recipe for that? I would tell them, no, you are barking at the wrong tree. I am not here to give you a recipe to get rid of this or that. I'm not a psychotherapist. Go see a hypnotist, go see a psychotherapist or whatever. My job, what I'm trying to deliver is not that. What I'm trying to give is inner peace. Very different. Very different. So as long as you are asking me for something else than inner peace, you are not asking in the right direction. I want to be very clear about that. You are following me? Sometimes people come, they have a problem with health. I tell them, I'm not a doctor. You have a psychological problem. I am not a therapist. You are smoking. It's not. I used to be a big smoker. So try. I have my method. But it worked. But I'm not teaching it.
So in other words, just be interested in the truth.
Yeah. If you're interested in the truth, eventually forget anything else, and all the psychological issues will be addressed. Imagine that it's like you have a poison ivy in your backyard, and every time you go in the backyard, you touch some leaf, and you say, oh, this leaf hurt me. I'm going to remove it. First, it burns to remove it, right? But then the tree is going to, the plant is going to grow more leaves. It's not going to solve your problem. It could be to be a different leaf hurting you on a different part of your body. The solution is to uproot the damn thing.
But what if
you don't have a poison ivy in the UK? You don't know what I'm talking about.
No, I don't. I'm not very good with gardening. But what if I was to pursue the truth? What if I was pursuing the truth?
Then that's fine.
To get rid of all my ills?
But if you are...
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but you are not pursuing the truth.
That's not pursuing the
No,
truth. So
you are trying to get rid of your ills.
Is that kind of using the truth?
Yes, and it's not going to work. That's why you have to understand what I said. The determinant factor in my case was an understanding. It was the understanding that my endeavor or my undertaking, my endeavor to get rid of my psychological problem was doomed to fail, because it will never bring about the real happiness I was seeking. It would never, even if I get rid of my shyness, would I be happy? No, hell no. Why? Because would that eliminate all my problems, my neediness, my fears? No.
The realization you came to, the understanding, as you said, can that only come after so many failures?
However we come to the understanding is grace, but it's grace that we bestow upon ourselves. As long as we want to play the game of being a separate individual, there is no way for us to hear this very simple possibility that we are not a human being, that we are consciousness, and that consciousness is not human. That's all. You're not a human organism. You're not a human animal. A human animal is an extraordinary engineering design. You know.
So ultimately, is there nothing I can do other than be interested in the truth? And that can only come from itself through grace.
What you can understood is that to get rid of your problem is not going to bring about the happiness you seek. That's all you have to understand. But as long as you believe that you get rid of this or that problem is going to make you happy, you are fooling yourself. You are really fooling yourself. Look how many people are wealthy, good-looking, young, healthy, and commit suicide. How many? But this belief that happiness, that if only I had the bank account, I had the health, I had the relationship, I had the looks, I had the car, the Gucci bag, the Louboutin shoes. That's a new one. The Louboutin shoes. I have a new one. A new sponsor. I'm not going to use them, but.
But what about things like sadhana, spiritual practice? No. Am I totally wasting my time? You know, I say I have...
The good reason to be here, once you have come here once, is if you come back, it's because you enjoy it.
Part of me does.
Otherwise, there is no need to come back.
True.
I mean, because it doesn't make sense. I mean, you go somewhere, you have a bad time, why would you come back? You didn't get it the first time, did you? Unless you are into S&M, that's a different. I respect that.
No. My mind complicates it so much. My mind just turns me in knots. I mean, I've been seeing Rupert 5 years, and the more I seem to get into this, it's almost like sometimes it feels the harder it gets.
Don't go to Rupert or to me unless, when you come back, you decide that was nicer than my daily life. That's all.
I also enjoy the friendship.
Yeah, whatever. The air, the friendship, the space, everything which has, especially everything which is invisible. Invisible. Yeah, that's important. So that's what was taking me to my teacher again and again, is because I was enjoying with him and with the like-minded friends around him, something that was invisible. That was a real commodity that was sold at this pub.
And is that what is invisible on what you call the luminal level, is it? I don't know if
Yeah.
So, my final word, if I leave here and end up getting a good whiff of that while I was here, is that what I'm after?
What is visible is not important. That which is invisible is the meat. It's a metaphor. Where's the beef? You don't know what it is that attracts you, you know. First time I met my teacher, you know, he didn't look like I had met before. I remember that a yogi, and he was very impressive at Hatha Yoga, and he was sitting in his majesty, you know. And I asked him a question that was a little bit controversial, and I felt that I received a lot of energy. I felt so bad, really bad. I didn't come back. But when I met my teacher, it was natural. He didn't feel like the big realized guru. He was a regular man, old style gentleman, you know. But I thought, well, I like to be his friend, you know. That's what I thought. That was the invisible little thing. No more questions here?
Francis.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you if you could give an example or elaborate on how to contemplate the higher ideas that you've spoken of, let's say the number pi or infinity. If one was to see, it leads, you said it often leads to, it can lead to the experience of truth. And I feel like I have done that, and it seems that you just have to obsess with it.
I absolutely didn't give that as a path. The path is what we do what we do here. I just mentioned that for the following reason. To give an example of realms that are not mind-like. That's the only reason why I mentioned that. To give an example of realms, for instance, that in which there is no time, but in which there is still diversity. For instance, the number E is not the number pi, is not the number 1. So there are distinctions, right, in this realm. But there is no time. So I was giving this example to open, to keep the possibility open that mind-like realms were not the only game in town. That's all. I was not suggesting to pursue that because that's a different story, but I can answer this. Then it's a question of vocation. We are all different.
Right, actually I did want to ask.
We all have different vocation. It is not for everybody to be a mathematician, because a mathematician is not someone who knows mathematics, is someone who loves it. It's very different. So it's only a very small percentage of people who are natural mathematicians. It's a small percentage of people who are musicians or painters or artists or dancers or gardeners or cooks or doctors, nurses, priests, whatever, you know. Policemen, soldiers. There are all kinds of vocations. So some vocations, mathematicians, is going to contemplate. His job is to contemplate the realm of mathematical ideas. An artist, his realm is to a painter to look at certain aspects of the realm of beauty, and a musician, a composer, to listen to some other aspect of the realm of beautiful ideas, etc.
Yes, I think I asked that because in my exploration, certain themes are of interest to me, like space and time, or some level of mathematics, although it's not something I obsess over, or it's not a vocation. And also with aesthetics, like music, for instance, something that I started to get interested more recently to learn and get involved in. And it does seem to, because I feel like my root interest is the revelation through these, not as a goal, but
most of us here, our priority is the truth. Our real vocation is the truth. The rest is, I play tennis, it's not my vocation. I love remaining informed about physics, and from time to time going back to it to make sure I'm not rusted, and I still can do some exercises in general relativity or in quantum mechanics, just to make sure I have these skills at my disposal, like someone who once plays the violin, doesn't play it, but once in a year picks up the violins and for 3 days tries to play a partita or something like that. That's not. We have a name in that in French. We call this hobbies. These are kind of hobbies, sweet hobbies. It's not really a vocation. It's part of the celebration. But for truth lovers, our real vocation is truth.
I feel like that's my underlying. What I really wanted to ask was that all these activities, which might involve aesthetics or some form of contemplation, it is ultimately about truth for me when I do involve with it. So I guess I was wondering if there was a correct way to do it. To me, it seems like you have to contemplate them for extensive periods of time and consider all mental perspectives, or be really involved in it, and then something might be revealed or might not.
What is important is to be open. I'm often amazed how close we are in once we have got determined something, and then we identify with it, and we are attached to a theory, to a concept, and then it becomes like fossilized. When and there is no freedom there. I want you to be free from what I say, but also free from all preconceived ideas about beauty, about politics, about ethics, about all of that stuff, to be free from all of that. To know nothing. Meister Eckhart, he says, to know nothing, to have nothing, and to want nothing. He was calling that to be poor in spirit. The biggest attachment are to concept. It's very strange. But people who are religious, for instance, they would give their life to the church. They would give all their belongings to the church. They would give their sex life to the church. So they would sacrifice, but their concepts about Jesus, about whatever, the afterlife, no way they would give that up. So there is crystallization around. And can't we take everything with a grain of salt? You know? And also be open to change. When I had all kinds of preconceived ideas. When I met my teacher, I could see that within a very short time, my political belief systems, what I believe about art to be true, etc., all of that changes. Finally, I didn't know much, but I was then I guess I was open. I was open to be shown things, to be there is something beautiful, I think, about a scientific upbringing, is that we don't like very much beliefs. We want to check it out, and we have this openness that if something experientially comes up that doesn't jive with what we believe, we are very ready to get rid of our previous belief system, and not only not being unhappy about having to do it, but being happy to have done it. You know, to have got rid of something that was false and replace it with something that was better. You know, that's how scientific progress is made, and that's something kind of that you don't find in other realms. This type of openness. It's rather things that are inherited from the past, and that we have the mission kind of to perpetuate. That's a very old ways human societies have survived. And
Thank you.
Luciana. She says, I know that I do not need you to confirm my experience of liberation, but I do need your help to remain always in this peace, to stay away from states, and not to go back to identification. You are my voice after all. If you say I'm deluding myself, I would want to believe it, and I fear that I could remove all the progress in understanding and happiness to prove you right. You said that every day before your satsang, you wonder if a miracle will happen, and it always happens, and nevertheless, you are surprised when it does. I know why, because the moment understanding happens, there is no teacher, no student, only consciousness finding and surprising herself. Is that so? Yes, but I was referring, you see, of course you are not here, but you have attended other retreats. And in the course of the retreat, something changes that is invisible. But the ones who are there, they experience it. At least the ones who come back. And right in this moment, I know it. It has worked again this retreat. It's never failed. It's mysterious. Would you, she goes on, would you not say you do the best job ever? I don't do job. As my teacher used to say, I listen to the question, I listen to the answer, and then I say the answer. It's not that that's just a public address system, it's nothing. So, and I am often surprised by what comes. You know, sometimes I say, wow, that's weird, or wow, that was beautiful, or wow, that was funny. You know, I am enjoying, if something funny comes, I laugh. You know, so really, if I was creating the joke, I shouldn't laugh, right? Because I know it, right? If you know it, you shouldn't laugh, right? So I am surprised by the joke. So it's not, you know, it's like in a dream. You create the dream, but there are elements in the dream that still surprise you. That's the beauty of it. It's the same here in this dream. The fun of the dream is that you can be surprised by our own creation. So, how was it? She said, would you not say you do the best job ever? How was it at the beginning when you first began to teach non-duality? Can you tell us something about then? It is not, we can all be teachers of non-duality if we experience non-duality. So, to the extent that we experience non-duality, we can share this experience. Just as we can share what we understand. We can share, do our best to share what we experience. What we understand is part of what we experience. What we experience is bigger than what we understand. So what we truly understand, what we truly experience, we can share it. I mean, there is no law, at least in America, that prohibit us from sharing what we understand and what we experience. There are other countries, it's not the same, right? But thankfully, we live in America, and there is no law. There is a constitution that says that we can share what we understand and what we experience. I mean, not those words, but I think that 9 Supreme Court justices would agree with me. So that's a beauty. So in the same way, I could, everybody can be a teacher. My recommendation would be absolutely honest and talk only about you understand and or experience in the moment itself. Don't even use past experiences unless you use them to illustrate a point, as an illustration. But the teaching is what you is a sharing of what you understand and what you experience in the moment itself. And also, don't teach the stones. I mean by that, when you teach, you address consciousness. You don't address body-minds. And you address the openness. If there is no openness, don't teach. Teaching when there is no openness, I call it preaching. Preaching and teaching is not the same. Don't preach. Teaching is if there is a demand, if there is a question. If there is a question, it means that there is an openness, because if there is a question of sort or a need that you feel, it means that they don't have the answer. If they don't have the answer, they are open. So the prerequisite for, and that's a moment when the teacher appears. The teacher appears with the question. There is no teacher. It is a question that creates a teacher. That's why I don't do speeches. I'm so bad at doing speeches. When people come here the first day, I say, well, I have to say something. You are welcome. What am I going to say next? You know? It's a problem. Then I say, oh, be careful, my bathroom over there, don't walk back there, or things like that, because I have nothing to say. The teacher is not there when you arrive. There is no teacher. There is Francis John Doe in his house, right? Yeah. The teacher arises with the question and leaves with the answer. At the end of the answer, no more teacher. Divya, so there is a teacher because there is a question. If understanding is Sat Chit Ananda, it would explain the happiness felt while understanding new scientific concepts or reading a good novel, right? Absolutely, Divya, yes. There is always a form of happiness involved with understanding. Even when you understand that your partner is cheating on you, it's just that you don't realize right away that Vikrant. I seem to look at life from the spectacles of past conditionings. How do I look at perceptions, sensations, and thoughts without labeling them? Well, you can label them. It's not a problem. And how do I look at persons and situations without prejudging them in my mind? So, look at persons when you interact with someone, interact with the consciousness in this person, not with the body-mind, being open to the possibility that it is the same consciousness in you and in them that perceives, that you are on both sides of this exchange, of this interaction. So that will go a long way. Regarding situations, see that the world is your body. and that you just as and that you are the creator and manager of your body and of the world, so that the events that are happening in the world, they are not hostile towards you. They are the flow of things. Ultimately, they have a purpose.